Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Let's Talk Vibes podcast. I'm your host, Lauren.
And I'm Yana.
We speak soul contracts, illuminating the path to higher understanding. This is episode 3, part 2 of our introduction to the numbers of the soul contract system. In this episode, we'll be discussing numbers 10 through 22, also known as the combination numbers. Yana, do you want to explain to everyone what the difference is between a combination and a double number?
Yes, so a double number is basically numbers 1 through 9. They can be broken down, they're single digits. And so you get the 1 1 2 2 3 3 frequency, okay? The combination numbers are that 10 through 22. They're these
Mhm.
double digit numbers that can then be broken down to a single digit X aspect. So, for example, the 10 energy then also gets broken down to the 10 plus 0 is 1. So you get the 10 1, which is the merging of multiple energies together. Today, we're just going to focus on numbers 10 through 22 and how they show up on your chart.
Yeah.
Okay.
And exactly like Yana is saying, keeping in mind that these numbers never show up on their own. Like it's not going to suddenly be like a 10-10 or a 10-3. It's always the 10-1. And so we'll talk about this more actually in next week's episode of kind of how this really shows up in a chart and the fact that it's never just going to be the 10 that's there. It's always going to be the 1. But just for the sake of today's introduction, we do want to focus on those numbers themselves. So
Okay.
should we
Tell me
hit it
about the
off with
one, Lauren.
with the 10, you mean?
I mean, yes, the 10.
The
I'm
1 plus
excited.
0? Yeah. Well, the 10, I can't help but always bring things back to astrology because I had studied astrology before soul contracts. So the 10, it is so Virgo energy for me. It represents Virgo and it is one of the numbers that is so represents the sign so well. Virgos, if you don't know about astrology, they are very, very hardworking. They tend to be a little bit of a type A personality, if you will, can really have all of their lists and their to-do lists together, but they can be perfectionists. And the downside of that as well is that they can be very self-critical. Like your own harshest critic is very much the 10 energy. What about for you?
And critical of others, right? I mean, we're
Yes,
so
it
hard. We
goes
think,
both ways. Yeah.
right, this 10 energy, it's like my way is the best way to do something, and we should just do it my way. And it's like, well, there are many different ways. But you know what I found for this 10 frequency when it's in, especially in the talent position, because it's a service energy, the service
Mm-hmm.
soul, you
Mm-hmm.
find nurses and doctors and people who are even some flight attendants because they're of service to other people.
Yeah.
Right. So I love when it plays out like that because you really get to see this energy in action and you're like, oh, you're actually like you're on path. You're following your soul's like journey and like what you set out for. Um the 10 to the 10, not 10 to, but the 10 also
Yes.
is like that balance to that masculine one energy, right?
Yeah.
So we have seen, as we discussed with the 1 2, but together, we have seen how that plays out opposite for like whatever. If you're a man, it shows more feminine. And if you're a woman, it shows more masculine in your life and in your chart. And also, something that is very surprising, the 10 1 or the 10, right? It's that divorce number.
Yes. It's
And
going between extremes, right? So that's something that I see so much in the 10 is it going back and forth between extremes on something, right? So that can be leading a lot to self-doubt. Like you'll be really confident to take a step, to take an action and then totally doubting. And so if you think about that in a relationship, you're so sure this person is the one for you. And then maybe suddenly, or maybe over time, you go to the other end and it's like, I cannot be with this person anymore. So you have this number in your chart.
I do. And I have no problem sharing. I am a divorced woman, but I also have divorced parents.
Yeah.
So typically when we see this energy in a chart, it's not all, it doesn't mean that you're going to get divorced and it doesn't mean that that's like your outlook and your future in your marriage or your relationship. It just shows that if you can't find that balance, right? If you can find how to make it work, unfortunately, this disempowerment comes in from that one that creeps in. And it's like, I either have to claim my power back or we can do this together, or I have to claim my power back, right? So you'll find that either people have been divorced with this energy or their parents. So
Yeah.
they're
I
a
have divorced
product of
parents.
divorce. Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. I have child of divorce. I want to touch back, circle back to when you were talking about, the one is the masculine. And so the 10, it's the ambiguity of the fact that spirit has no gender. And so what we'll see very often, again, we say, oh, 10 is the divorce number, but it's also an energy that shows up very often within the queer community because that's a community, depending, there can be many different identities, but the idea that you're playing with gender, if you will. You're not kind of going into the confines of what everyone else is either saying gender is going to be or loving someone, of the genders that we're supposed to love, sort of thing. That shows up a lot as well. So again, to not make people afraid that you have this number, you're going to get divorced, you can be a straight person and have this number. You know what I mean? Like,
There is hope for all of us.
yeah. So it's just that there are really the 10 is a very multifaceted number. There are so many different ways that this can be expressed. And it is certainly one like I'm so excited for when we deep dive it
Hmm.
because it can show up so differently. So again, don't go reaching out to your divorce attorney just because you have this number in your chart.
Totally.
But also, when I read this for people and find out they're divorced, it's like not a surprise.
Yes. And so that's why it's so important to like get ahead of it before, like if it's important to you, get ahead of it before that's the result. There is a beautiful balance that you can find. And, this is just like the optimist hopeful in me speaking to everyone.
Well, I mean, if we're going to kind of talk about that for a second, I think part of it for me, when it comes to these energies, it's just about recognizing them. So it can even just be validating if you are in a relationship and you're feeling like, wow, I felt so differently about this person 3 years ago when we met. Why do I feel so differently? You might have this number in your chart. And it's not to say that you're going to get divorced or you should get divorced, but it could even just to help to explain for you why you feel differently than you did before. You're not someone who's going to kind of stay consistent in your feelings and in your beliefs. You're going to go between extremes. It's not even that you're just going to change. It's you're going to have been a 10 and then you're going to be a 1 on the scale, right?
Totally. I love it. Okay, let's get into our 11, which
Yeah,
then
speaking
turns
of
into,
balance, right?
yes, which then turns into the 11 too, right? So the 11 is all about assimilation, it's about structure. And the main lesson of this frequency is death to life. So
Yeah.
you may experience lots of loss, whether it's physical loss, people dying around you. It could be near death experiences. It could be,
Yep.
you lose lots of jobs or lots of people in your life, lots of relationships, lots of friendships, lots of just lots of loss. You're experiencing this loss. And then what happens is, as that happens, it's almost like your house, like the foundation of your house just like crumbles. And now you're like back to square one. And you're like, everything I believed that I thought I knew is different, that it no longer exists. So now you have to rebuild this new life, this new structure of truth for yourself, right? And it's
Yeah.
like everything changes.
And it's that it's usually a really rapid change, right? And with these experiences, if you've ever heard someone share a near death experience, right? Usually this kind of comes out of nowhere. You're not expecting that. And they are forever changed by it. And likewise, it can also be the death of a loved one. So for myself and many of my family members, we have 11-2 in our chart. And when I was
Mm,
10, my uncle died in a cycling accident,
mm,
right? None of us knew that morning that he was going to die. And it rocked our family and changed all of us forever. I still, after my spiritual awakening, I started, processing things. I was like, wow, I've been holding on to this grief for, you know, multiple decades, essentially. I mean, it rocked us. And so what's actually, the researcher in me, I've looked up charts for celebrities or like people in history who have died really suddenly and impacted the world. I looked up so many people, only one of them didn't have an 11-2. Like people like Martin Luther King and JFK and even like Amy Winehouse or like Marilyn Monroe, like just people where it's like this would they would had a sudden death and it would have kind of shocked the world to a degree. So many of them had that number. So it even
Mm,
goes to show sometimes it's something you experience, but also having that energy can be an experience like your death could bring to the world. Um,
totally. And what an awesome entrepreneurial energy too, right? So 11s, 11 twos, they're like these builders. Sometimes they may actually be builders by professions or architects, and they build these beautiful structures or sculptures, but it's about great business energy, but it's about actually building your own structure of truth, whatever that looks like. And maybe some people will write a book to share that, right? That two element creeps in, and it's like you want to share. You want to
mm,
share like what you've learned. You want to share what your own truth is, what feels right for you. And it's funny because in my family too, we have 11 twos. And what I
mm,
didn't realize until you were just saying that is that yes, we've all experienced some type of loss, nothing crazy. Although for me, I've had a few near death experiences all
really?
before the age of 5, which
No
is so,
way.
yes, which is so wild. And like till this day, there's the one, obviously the only one I was old enough to remember. It's as if I close my eyes right now, I could just picture the entire event happening. And it's just like so wild. But for all of us, we're all like our business sense, we're almost
Mhm.
all entrepreneurs. We're all like, what's the next idea? What's the next thing? What can we build? Whether it's a
Yeah.
business or something, something tangible. It's like that spirit is in us. So to see it like showing up in the chart, it's like so validating. Cause you
Yeah.
question, why do I have this characteristic and why do I always feel this way or this strong drive? And to see it like play out is like so beautiful.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, you know, that structure that we mentioned is so key. And you and I both have this, and we both, it's so nice when you know the soul contract language because we can just say, oh, this is my 11-2 needing to get clear on the structure. And again, this is how, numbers interact together. Sometimes I feel like that's what the 6 needs in order to take its leap and its jump is a little bit of the structure that and the foundation that the 11-2 is good at building. But again, depending on where this is in your chart, you may come into life completely lacking that.
That's
And so
me.
what happens, and I'd be curious to know if this has happened in your relationships, is codependency because this other person you're in a relationship with, whether romantic or otherwise, is providing a structure for you. And the person who's the 11-2, they become dependent on that structure. And so they become dependent on that person to provide that structure for them.
Oh my goodness. That's like such a
Did I just read you?
no, that's like such like I feel like I'm like sitting in front of my therapist and they're like, "Let's talk about
Yeah.
your codependency." And I'm like, I don't know if I'm really ready to tackle that yet, but we can circle back." But yeah, you see it and you see it played out and play out. And the thing is, it's not meant to keep you in that space. It's meant for you to grow from,
Yeah.
right? How do we get to that beautifully structured, balanced, right? That too, beautifully structured, balanced life and
Yeah.
relationships and business and all of that. It's nice.
Speaking of balance, also brings us into the 12 because 12 is
Yes.
Libra.
Mm-hmm.
And, Libra being an air sign, you can think about the intelligence. The 12 is so much about expansion. Like, expansion is truly the key to understanding this number. Expansion of love, expansion of knowledge. I to me, I'm sometimes surprised that this is not the Jupiter number, right? Because again, if astrology, Jupiter is
Yep.
the expansive one. So I feel that energy through here as well because it is just always wanting to expand. But the problem is constant expansion is not good for us, right? So this can also be the burnout number. So you got to be careful with that one.
Oh, totally. Right. And also with the Libra scales, right? Because of that balance, very often people who have this energy in their charts often are unbalanced. Their emotions are very up and down. You may even feel bipolar, but it's like, it's just when you find that balance with not becoming overly fanatical about something or overly like dive into something where you neglect every other part of your life, whether it's a person, whether it's a book or a new trade, a job, whatever it is. It's like when you learn to balance out all that, you don't have to have this up and down. You don't have to have this burnout energy. You know, 12s are also, they have FOMO, fear of missing out. They're always in a rush. They like need to be a part of everything.
Story of my life. It is my my soul destiny. We'll get into what that means.
I love that. But
Uh,
then this other beautiful 12/3 energy, you know, because you're here to expand and share love. It's like this giving out of love, right? And you're here to communicate. Great podcasting energy, people who want to because they're here to communicate, people who want
talk,
to write a
talk,
book,
talk.
right? You just have this innate need to share and like get it out there. And it is such a beautiful love frequency.
And you know what? It is just really occurring to me now, this other connection into Libra that the 12 will have, because the 12 is known for wearing rose-colored glasses, and I love that. I had
Yes.
honestly, before I
Yes.
ever found the system, I could see that being true for myself. Like, I want to have that rosy outlook. I want to be optimistic. Also have the 10-1, so I also can go to the pessimism side. But the thing that I'm just realizing now that it relates to Libra is like Libra can also be a little bit naive. I think there's that aspect to Libra, which is a Venus ruled sign, wants to see the beauty in all things. I hadn't even thought about kind of that connection in to the 12. So, yeah, I think again, if you have the 12, while it can have its struggles because you feel like you can't stop moving and everything needs to happen right now and you need to just constantly go uphill, you also see the world in a very beautiful way.
Hmm. And because you like to, 12s like to like have a million hobbies, and they may either often change careers because they can't decide what they want to do, or they'll have multiple careers or businesses or trades. It's like they just want to consume so much, and it's almost like compulsive. Like I need it all. I want it all. I need it all. And also what's really cool about that is depending on the placement on your chart, it could be a number signifying maybe like your last or second to last incarnation. And that is why
Yep.
your soul is in such a rush to
Yeah.
like learn as much as possible because I
Yeah.
may never come back here.
It's definitely an old soul energy, and we'll have to get into that part of it, the last incarnation, because I've also seen another practitioner who always says end of an incarnation cycle rather
Yes.
than the, and that makes you think of things so much differently. So we'll have to talk more about that and kind of dive in and get your own thoughts as well. But let's talk about the 13 because we're talking about 12 and they see a beautiful world. The 13, I feel like, is so much part of, like, 13 is the rosy energy, right? That is the beautiful world energy. It's Christ consciousness energy. It's just like a very loving utopian energy.
That divine feminine, that I'm just going to sit still and I'm just going to wait for that flow, right? For that
Mhm.
person, that energy, that thing to just come to me. And when it does, it's like this mother mirror energy. It's like I'm just gonna like let it sink into me, and I'm just gonna give this all this love that I have to like share. It's a very loving energy. It just
It's
feels so good.
flow and ease and grace and doing things the easy way.
So nice. I mean, who doesn't want to be basked in that,
Yeah.
right? But then also that also comes with that four element, which is like that mother wound, right? When you put it all together, and it's like
Mhm.
you may have issues with your mother, you may have had issues with your mother, and now you have issues with your child, but it really is about learning to come from that unconditional place, unconditional love, And when you do that, you're able to be in the flow of like just receiving, right? And like, again, who doesn't want to be in that?
Yeah, I love this energy. It's always a really beautiful energy to see in people's charts, and just to get into the flow of yourself to really just kind of be able to tap into and enjoy. It's beautiful, it's loving, it feels secure. Think about like the warm embrace from your mom if you have a good relationship with your mom, right? That's the thing, right?
Totally.
Because some people would be like,
Yes.
"What is that?" Well, I guess we would know where you have 13-4 in your chart if you do.
Totally. And it's like, as I'm speaking to you directly now, Lauren, have you
Yeah.
ever been around someone where you're like, God, it feels so good to be around them and actually seeing that they have a 13-4?
I don't know. I mean, I can totally relate to that feeling, but I don't know if I've ever seen then their chart to see if they have that
There is
though.
one person in particular where I feel that like, oh, just the love is just amazing. And of course, when I pulled up their chart with their permission, of course, right? You don't just
Yeah.
randomly pull up people's charts.
We'll talk more about the ethics of charts.
Yes. They just had this beautiful 13-4 in their soul destiny.
Yeah.
Right. And that comes with the ups and downs, and the positive and the negative aspect of that number. But I was like, yes, this is why I feel this like
Yeah.
unconditional love from this person. It's just
Yeah.
it's just amazing.
And I always
Amazing.
think it's really interesting if when women have, gotten married and changed their names, and then the 13-4 enters the chart, and then that's the name they had when they became a mother. I just think is a kind of beautiful sort of synchronicity going on there.
Totally.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, next we got our 14-5. Where
Uh,
my
It's
Scorpios
a
at?
yeah, it's a bit of a vibe change if we're honest.
Totally. Let's
Very
liven it up, okay?
yeah,
Scorpio energy. They're very secretive. They're very intense, right?
very intense energy.
Right, very
Yes.
intense. It's like this reflective mirror.
Yeah.
It's like you're constantly placed into these relationships and situations with people where either they're always reflecting back to you parts of yourself that you don't want to see or have to face, or you're that reflection for them, right? And that
Yeah.
really could be the word intense is absolutely accurate.
Yeah. And with the 14, because I typically associate that like the 14 is the one who is the mirror. They are the one who is reflecting back what what the other person has been trying to keep hidden. So think about that. Like we talked in the last episode about the 7 tries to keep their authentic selves hidden. So imagine a 7 is trying to hide themselves, meets a 14, sees it reflected back, and they're like, shit, you know what I mean? All that stuff.
Totally.
I'm like, have we decided if we're gonna swear on here or not?
I think it's okay. I think our audience will approve.
I mean, they're just like shit, fuck. Oh no.
Sometimes it's warranted.
Because honestly though, think about as the experience of someone who is a 7, I sometimes felt like if someone saw past my mask, that I had failed to hide well enough. So think about what that is like to encounter a 14, see it reflected back to you. The intensity for both people because of that experience, that like again, Scorpios, we talk about this with Scorpio, they see you, see through all the bullshit, right? There's no lying or hiding from a Scorpio. And that energy is so encapsulated in this. And it is so, again, it just creates really intense relationships. But the other thing I always really like to point out with 14 being the mirror, who is the mirror when no one is reflecting onto them? What is the mirror themselves? So the 14 is spending really their life asking, who am I? And on this journey of self discovery. And it is through these intense relationships. So again, maybe not always going to be pleasant, but that's how they're learning who they are.
Hmm. Yeah, that reflection aspect is huge. And on a positive aspect, that reflection thing could really lead to these people in most of the placements in their charts. It's like they're here to write, right? They're here to
Mhm.
write and reflect on their life and their experiences and write it all out and then just share it with people,
Yeah.
right? It's very much like it could be very therapeutic for somebody with that 14 to just start writing. Just start
Yeah.
writing.
Yeah, if you have a 14-5 in your soul destiny, I bet you already know what the title of your memoir is gonna be. If you don't, start thinking about it because 'cause you're gonna write a book. Like, you're gonna live this
Totally.
life, you're gonna learn about who you are, and you're gonna write and share that experience with others. Yeah, again, choose your title if you haven't already.
I love it. I love it. And speaking of that whole reflection thing, right? Then it leads us into the 15
Yeah.
6, but the 15 energy,
Mhm.
which is that the connection to the higher self, right? It's like
Yeah,
that journey of finding source within, right?
yeah.
It's like we're on this constant journey of like trying to figure out like what is life and who am I externally, who am I internally, but it's about um being on this gentle journey, but for a lot of people it starts off like you keep going in circles in life, right? And it's
Yes.
like you may change careers, you may change majors in school, but it's like you follow other people because you don't know what your path is, so you're following other people. And then eventually you're like, yeah, that's not me. Like I'm not this. So then you start a new journey and now you're following somebody else, but you're not here to follow other people. You're here to follow your own journey.
Yes. And, as you talk about like trying things, right? It's very much, it's kind of this like experiential learner, right? Or, I need to go down that path in order to know whether or not that path is for me. Right. So, like, probably go back to the Scorpio. Scorpio can probably stand at the fork in the road and knows exactly which path they need to go down. The
Mm-hmm.
15 is going to spend 2 miles walking down one path and be like, you know what? Let me go see what the
Maybe,
other
yeah.
what the other road had to offer. Like, or you have the expression of like trying on the hats, but like literally is going to try every hat on because they aren't going to know which one fits them best until they have tried on all of the options. So this is where you can kind of see some of that six energy we talked about. Six is trying to do too many things at once. I mean, when there's a 15-6, part of it is like you have to learn in terms of the six not to do everything at once. But the 15 is like, I am going to do all of the things.
Totally.
Yeah.
Do you have a 15-6 by the
I have
way?
a 15-6. Yeah. I do. I do. The 15-6 also can research something to death. Like they are definitely very intelligent, very intellectual, right? And like they're going to research, they get into it and they're going to research it to the point that they don't even want to take action anymore because they burn out on the research.
So with your 15-6 and your
Yeah.
12-3, you really have to balance out that burnout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have come, with my eights where I'm like learning to ask for help. Like I've learned to say to people, can you research this for me? Because I just can't go there.
Totally. I love when you're able to do that because then it's like you don't have to do everything on your own. Pass
Yeah.
something off. Just the way you help other people, they're more than happy to help you. And honestly, if they're not, is that somebody you want in your life anyway? Someone who can't pay it forward, right? Or pay it back? Anyway, I digress. All right. Let's get into our 16-7,
Yeah.
right?
I love
That
the 16. I have
okay.
16
I
in my
like your
chart.
tagline for it. So tell me who the 16 is.
The 16 is the translator. So the
Mm-hmm.
16, it's really about grounding in spiritual energies into the earth plane. And so the way that this manifests is that the person who is able to take, within the spirituality, at least, but really any field, these high level concepts and then translate them, explain them in a way that is easy to understand, that is accessible. Speaking in plain English, I always think back to my biology teacher in high school. He said to us, you've understood something when you can explain it to a 5-year-old. So I'm like, I'm pretty sure he had a 16-7 in his chart. Yeah, it's just, another good example, and to show that this does not need to be about spirituality, is Bill Nye the Science Guy, right? He is taking big science concepts, and then he makes it for kids. He makes it so anyone can understand. And so I think everybody can relate to this because you're probably some sort of specialist, to whatever degree in something that you do and something in your life. And if you try to talk to somebody who's not in that, you need to be mindful of the language that you use and recognize they're not going to know all the words, all the terms. They think about like the Super Bowl just happened and the Kelsey brothers have their podcast. They have No Dumb Questions, right? As a
Mm.
segment on their podcast. And it's the idea of like, we know that not everybody knows all of these things and you're going to ask these questions. Like I could benefit from that. I don't know much about football at all.
Totally. Now, I know that you your tagline for this frequency, the 16, is a translator.
Yeah.
One major tagline for me for this frequency is the rebel, right? It's that
Mm,
rebellious energy. It's when I'm younger, I may lie, cheat, steal, lie and cheat and steal, and I'm just going to do everything rebellious against my parents or against society, and I'm just going to test all my limits and all my boundaries, right? And it's like someone who's just so relatable to other people that people connect with you very easily. You may have friends from all walks of life, and maybe that's just because you're out rebelling and you're just doing whatever. But it's so funny to me because every time I do a reading and I see this energy, I'm like, did you rebel when you were younger? And they're all like, yes.
which is so
I was
funny because
wild child.
I I guess I've never even thought to ask people that because I was like, have I had that come up? And then I'm like, well, you haven't even asked them. Because again, that's not my experience. I was not a rebel at all. So I haven't even asked people, I'm
So
like, I guess I gotta ask people that now.
where does your 16/7 fall?
Spiritual goals. So that's
Okay.
where for me, I really get into that spiritual aspect. And going back to the 11 2 that I have as spiritual talents shows that like I'm here to kind of build a spiritual philosophy. So I feel like a part of it is like I'm here to build this philosophy of truth and then I'm here to explain it to people in a way that makes sense. And it's like, oh, I've never understood that concept before, but you just explained it in a way that makes sense. My whole life, I speak using analogies. Like I the way my teacher said, you understand it, you can explain to a 5-year-old. I'm like, I know I've understood it when I can find the perfect analogy, what I call like a one-to-one. Some
Yes.
analogies are not a one-to-one. You have to have some creative license. But sometimes I'm like, this is the perfect analogy. So that for me, like that's why again, I talk about it as a translator because that's just so how it shows up in my life.
Right. And what a great little statement that you got from your teacher. This little
Mhm.
sentence of if you can explain it to a 5-year-old, you've done your job. That could be used like in all aspects of your life. When you're
Mhm.
talking to your partner, when you're talking to a parent or a child, anybody, and you're just trying to like get your point across because we go in circles so often in life. And that's such a beautiful way of getting you straight to the point and just being specific on this is what I'm trying to say or do or think or whatever.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. See, we learn so much. Every day you learn something new, don't you?
Yeah. And it goes to show again with these numbers, it's like we might be talking about one thing today, and we may read a chart for someone else and learn something completely new tomorrow because it shows up so differently for people.
Totally. Okay,
Yeah.
let's get into our 17, which goes with the
Yes.
17/8. The 17 is all about expression into society. It's like the mouthpiece of source. It's like they say very often people who have this energy, it's like they somehow always say the right thing at the right time. And you're
Mhm.
like, I kind of don't even know why I said that or where it came from, but it's
Yes.
just like that connection from source where it's just like you're the mouthpiece, you're going to express this and you're going to share this because it's going to mean something to people.
Yeah. Great orators for sure. Like it is a number that comes up really often in politicians, but I would also say it's going to be in activists, right? Like think about someone who's standing in front of a crowd and moving people with their
Yep.
words. And
Advocating.
it's one of those things like, hey, that can be used for good or for bad, right?
Totally. Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
without a doubt.
Yeah. But something that is beautiful about the 17 energy as well is that it's about learning to see the universal, brotherhood, kind of again, that unity, that connection between all. So there's this again, you just really I thinking about, Martin Luther King speaking in front, at the Washington Monument, and just the gathering of people, and like when how people feel when they're part of that crowd, and how connected people can feel. The 17, it's not only just about the speaker, it's about the audience and that connection. It's beautiful, beautiful energy.
Total. I have chills right now.
Oh,
Like picturing what you just described. Oh my God. Like it's like you almost feel like you're there, and like
yeah,
that energy of what that is all about, like takes over, and you're like, I feel it. Like I get it. So
yeah,
it's like you can envision what somebody with this frequency in their chart could do with their lives. Right. And a lot of it too, like it stems from like this being like suppressed from childhood, emotional suppression. And it's like you couldn't express when you were younger from your parents, maybe being like too dominating. And now, like, you're growing into your own, and you're like, no, no, no. I have things to say. I have important things to say. And I need to
yeah,
share and get it out there, not just for my partner to hear, but for society to hear. It's important. And they're like these advocators, and like they want to make that change. They want what they have to say to impact your life.
yeah. I need to double check MLK's chart, because I'm like, he must have a 17-8, because he did fight against the oppression. He was the great orator. He's talking about the unity, right? We're trying to the equality. I'm like, he must. The question is where.
Totally. Totally. Okay, let's get into our 89, which is also a very interesting number.
Yeah.
Um, right? It's all about choosing to follow spirit. Are you going to follow the path of ego, or are you going to follow the path of source, right? And it's like people with this frequency in their chart, they may start off where, right, it's about making decisions, but like it
Hmm.
starts off where you're so indecisive and unsure like how to move forward that you really do take on the opinions of others. And if someone suggests, I think this is your way forward, you're like, okay, that sounds good to me. I'm going to follow that path. And it may not
Yeah.
serve you. And then eventually you grow into, you know what? I know how to make the best decisions for myself. And you start to make these beautiful decisions that lead to a more soul journey or soul inspired journey.
And, you know, in addition to, right, the learning to make decisions, which it's so true, right? It is. It's about learning to kind of come to this place of finality, right? But not only in a decision making, but also in terms of process, right? Like we talk about with the sixes, maybe give up on things. The 18, when this number shows up in your chart, this is someone who is going to, if they have started it, they are going to complete it,
Mm-hmm.
right? This often shows up in people's charts as project manager. Like if someone
Mm-hmm.
has this, that's maybe a career. Once again, it's not to say if you have this, you're a project manager, but if you're a project manager and I see this in your chart, not surprised.
Right. Great business energy. They're great
Yeah.
leaders. They get stuff done.
Yeah.
So, like to your point, that project manager, perfect example of somebody who's leading groups of people to complete a project, to complete whatever it is. It's just like, let's go, guys. Like it's this great leadership role.
Yeah. And it the 18 is Aquarius, and it's one of those signs where I've typically not gotten it as much. But the thing I kind of focused on just recently, because I was being like, I don't get it. I don't, it fits with the 17, the kind of the brotherhood, all of that. What's it with the 18? And right, like Aquarius is a fixed sign, right? Out of all of the air signs, they're the ones who are going to get a task done. All the other air signs probably going to give up on that task, right? They're going to float away. But it's a fixed sign. They're going to finish what they start. They're going to have some more of that steadiness. And just as you talked about with the project manager, the leading of the groups, again, that Aquarius energy, that kind of that group energy mentality, I'm seeing as well. So it's again, we keep learning and seeing these connections.
Totally. I love it. I love it because every time you're going to sit in front of somebody and give a reading, you're going to gain some extra aspect of an energy where you're like, oh, I know exactly where this goes. And oh, like you're just adding to the bigger, it's like another piece to the puzzle of what each frequency, each energy, each number, each combination of numbers, like what it brings. And it's just like, oh, like I get it even more. It just feels so good.
So what about the 19?
Okay, 19 is fantastic. Listen, they're all fantastic, right? But you do kind of favor some. This is great because
I do
it's
love a
an
19 as
energy,
well.
yeah. It's an energy of like holding space. Like you're able to hold space for somebody. And like also like these are people who may have this strong desire to actually build like a physical space or even like a website and offer services of spiritual nature. They're just so good. It's so supportive. Like who doesn't want to be around that? I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. I often like will associate this with like if someone has the goal of, hosting retreats, right? Kind of or even building a retreat center like again, we talked about the combinations. If you have an 11-2 and the 19-1 in your physical triangle, like you had an 11-2 as your physical talents and your 12 or 19-1 as your physical goals, I'm like, this person's going to build a place where they hold space for people, right? They're going to have
Totally.
a retreat center, they're going to have some community center, like they're doing that. But as you say, like that can also be in more of a virtual space, as we move into more of the internet world, and into online, that can be happening in a virtual way. There's probably a lot of us who are in different types of online communities and you've never met these people before and there's
Oh
no,
yeah.
brick or mortar building, but that space is still being held for you in that way. So that person, probably or very possibly has that 19-1 maybe in their
Mm-hmm.
spiritual triangle,
Mm-hmm.
for
And
example.
also another fun fact about the 19 is the quality of it is laughter. So these are
Yes.
people who like to be funny, they like to laugh and like they bring this joyous environment to the
Hmm.
people around them. And hello, like what another bonus. You know, like
Yeah.
again, who doesn't want that?
I I need to remind myself because I've looked up Robin Williams's chart and I'm pretty sure it's one of those things I either went looking for it, and I can't remember. Did he have it or did he not? But like for me at least, I think about Robin Williams when I think about a 19-1 because he he taught a lot of us how to laugh.
Totally.
Yeah,
I love
love
that.
him.
Yeah. Okay, let's go. 20 frequency. This 20 energy is all about movement, right? It's the explorer, the experiential learner, right? But they
Yeah.
probably grew up in a very rigid household. They weren't allowed to do this and they weren't allowed to do that and they had very
Yeah.
little movement to, to wiggle with and to move around in.
Well, it represents Saturn. And so, again, for those who know astrology, Saturn is the father figure and it's also about restriction. So it's like the 20 in, I almost think about it in the childhood. It's like you're getting that Saturn energy and aspect to it. The dad often who is really setting these boundaries in place. But, you're talking about, movement when you in 20 you have the ability to be so wide open to ideas and just move between beliefs. So I often see this as like the spiritual seeker, like this is the person who was born into one religion and then converts religions like 5 times in their life. They're like, I'm going to try it all, kind of a little bit 15 energy in that respect, right? I'm going to try on every religion before I know which
Totally.
one is for me. And they don't even really find one, right? It's not about finding the one that fits. It's about just seeing what they all have to offer and exploring.
Exploring, right. And also
Yeah.
exploring in travel. They love to travel.
Yeah.
Okay.
It
These
can be
people like,
restless.
yes, totally. And the main lesson for this 20 frequency is all about war to peace. So people
Mhm.
who have this 20-2, right, this 20
Mhm.
energy in their chart, they will experience whether it's a lot of internal conflict, right? This like internal tug of war, what's right, what's wrong, and what do I do? What don't I do? Did I make the right decision? Did I make the wrong decision? Like, where should I go? Should I stay? Like, or they're actually experiencing like they're at war with people in their lives all the time. Maybe they physically went to war, they served, and they were in war,
Yeah,
but
it
it
can be that.
shows up like you have this lifelong war with people. And the name of the lesson is War to Peace. It's about saying, you know what? Is this really worth my energy? Is
Yeah.
this worth getting sick over? Is this worth like is this the hill you want to die on? Right? Which is
Yes.
funny between you and I. We've talked, we love that. But it's
Yes.
like
As
the
Aries.
whole, yeah, the whole peace element is like, just let it go. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
And if somebody wants to keep arguing with you, keep creating that war, say, okay, you're right. You're right. No problem. You're right. Whether you agree or not, you're right. And just let it go.
Well, and it's so interesting because again, it kind of pulls the 11 of letting things go from your life. And sometimes that's their choice, sometimes that's your choice. But sometimes that's the way that you find in order to find peace. Sometimes the lesson is to actually walk away from a relationship if they're not willing to disengage. So again, not that that's going to happen if you have this number that you're going to walk away from everyone, but on occasion, that's how that lesson will manifest.
Oh, yeah. Listen, internal peace is better than anything else in your life. That's it,
It's
period.
it's priceless, right?
Totally. Okay, let's get to our 21-3, our 21 energy, which is
Yes.
all about endurance and it's just warrior strength, but they've also experienced lots of hardships in their life,
Yeah.
right?
So they're
And
here to learn how to overcome hardship. They come with the endurance energy to be able to endure hardship. But the 21, it attracts in hardship in order for that to be endured and overcome. So it's not easy, right? We talk about 13, flow, do it the easy way. 21 is doing things the hard way. And so that's something I always ask people at 21 in their chart. Do you do things the hard way? Do you tend to do things the hard way? And something I've reflected on recently is how a lot of us live in societies that dictate that we do things the hard way, that there is somehow a lesser value in doing something the easy way. It's if you found an easier way to do it, it's suddenly not the outcome is not worth as much if you didn't have to kind of push and grind and endure. So
totally.
sometimes, I ask this to someone in their chart and they're like, well, I don't really know. And I'm like, well, just think of the society that we live in. Like, are you just doing what everyone else does? And it is doing it the hard way, right? We don't live in a place that lets us do it the easy way.
Right. And I will say, when I've seen this number, what often comes up is either I'll say, did you experience lots of hardships in your life? And they'll say, yes, X, Y, and Z. And the list is long. Or I have had people who say, no, not really. But really, it's like the perception of it because they've come
Yes.
out of it, because they're not stuck in that, because they didn't let it defeat them. They don't view it as a hardship because they endured past it.
Well, they love a challenge. Like at 21, they don't want to do it the easy way, right? The 21
Right.
wants a challenge. Like if it was easy, where was the fun in that? It's like again, sometimes it's society tells you what to do, and sometimes it's this internal feeling of where is the satisfaction if I didn't have to work hard or put in the effort? And yeah, like you say, it's so much a matter of perception. It's like, oh no, but anyone else would look at their life and be like, here's the list of examples that you are yourself not seeing.
Totally. And a really weird fun fact about this, I don't know if it's fun about the 21, but they like to overeat. Listen, I don't have a 21 in my chart, but I feel like with this overeating factor, like I'm like, I must have it somewhere.
Well, I think that really pulls in the three, if the 21 3, because you think about what is one of the reasons that people a lot of times overeat. It's like, well, it's emotional eating. And think
Right.
about for the threes,
The unworthiness.
not being in touch with their emotion, being like the emotion is out of, right. It's almost like the way that you can express it. Literally, that thought is coming to me in this moment. I hadn't
I
even
love
really
it.
thought about that before,
Okay.
but
Listen.
it's like, it seems so obvious now.
Totally. Okay, let's get to our final energy of the night, which is the 22, which
The
falls into a
beautiful, beautiful
22-4.
22. Yes.
Yes. The 22 is all about completion. It's this multi-dimensional energy. It's like this complete connection to source, right? And it's like
Yeah. Just
people who,
direct connection.
right. And it's also the combination of all the numbers kind of like
Yep.
poured into this one energy.
Mm-hmm. So
It's the
this is actually Jupiter. When I was saying before, 12 reminds me of Jupiter. This is actually our Jupiter energy. This is our just expansive energy in that respect. And I personally am someone who just pictures Source as like ball of light and energy, if you will. And like you just think that's totally what I picture for the 22 as well.
Totally. And then the main lesson in that is, and I hate the way this is called, but ugliness to beauty. And the reason
Mm.
I particularly hate it is because when I was younger, this is total TMI, but I've overheard somebody call me an ugly duckling.
Oh,
No, but,
no.
and they're like, well, you know, she may be like nothing now, but when she grows up, she's
Oh
gonna
my
be the
God.
beautiful swan. And I remember being like, how how do I feel? Like it has stayed with you, you know, something like that
Yes.
stays with you. So when I hear this 22 frequency being all about ugliness to beauty, it hits a little bit because it's all
Yeah.
about, well, I didn't struggle with it, but it can bring on very severe energies of like, I hate the way I look and I'm going to get cosmetic surgery and I'm going to go to this extreme to make
Yeah.
the outer side, the outer portion of me what society would refer to as beautiful, or they're like crazy obsessed with going to the gym because the body needs to be perfect. But it's like the whole lesson is it starts internally,
Right.
right? And it's about bringing your inner beauty to the outside beauty. And it's like once you accept your inner beauty, then it's like you accept your outer beauty and it's just you're perfect. You were created perfect just the way you are. Okay. And if someone in your life is telling you that you weren't, you could just say bye to them because there are plenty of people who will appreciate you and love you just the way you are. And the first person to do that should be yourself,
Mhm.
right? But
Easier
most of
said than
us,
done.
totally, listen, me too, most of us, myself included, we have to go through that challenge. We have to learn to love ourselves internally before we can love ourselves externally. But then once you do, it is such a beautiful space to be in. And also
Yes.
with this 22-4, right? We got that four element that can kind of that will creep in, you know, with the children and the abundance factor. But
Right.
that 22-4 will has the frequency of generational wealth, of you creating a legacy that you could leave behind, of you really having the ability to bring into fruition something that lasts for, you know, generations, you know, and
Yeah.
like, I mean, how fantastic is that?
Well, it's interesting when you bring in the four because the four is the sun, right? So I almost feel like the 13-4, we were gushing about the 13, and I feel like that's basking in the sun, but the 22 is as if you were able to walk into the sun. It's just like
Mm,
it, not just that it hits you, but that it envelops you. It's
I love
beautiful.
that.
But I feel like we do have to mention, depending on where this is in your chart, you feel like the sun is shut off. You feel like the sun is not shining. It never shines. It shines for other people, but not for you. And that is a cold, dark place potentially to be. So it can be a very difficult number to have. But what I like to say is, there are certain numbers like the 21 and the 22 that I'm like, this is calculus and we don't teach calculus to kindergartners. So if your soul has signed up for these lessons, you're ready for it. You didn't just show up here for the first time and you're jumping into the deep end. It's like you have been working your way to this side of the pool.
Totally. And to kind of like wrap up all of these numbers, right? It's not about, oh, this number showed up in my karmic elements and now I'm screwed for life.
No.
No, our biggest gifts are in our karma, are in our challenges, right? That's when we
Yeah.
grow the most. That's when we shine the most, coming out of that. So, yes, some of us have been hit with maybe some tougher lessons, but the thing is, it's all relative, right? So my toughest thing in life is equivalent to whatever your toughest thing in life is. But it's like, okay, are you going to stay there? Or do you want to see the other beautiful side of that energy and where you can go in life, how you can grow? And I'm not just talking about financial abundance. I'm talking about emotional, physical, spiritual, all of that, all of that. Just like to be able to grow into these positive aspects is like the goal, and it's the beauty, and it's like, I'm finally here. It feels so good. But obviously, you have to keep doing the work to stay there, right? Life
Yeah.
is not like, okay, I reached this goal and now I'm done. But it's like once you understand that you don't have to be stuck in the negative, karmic, challenging aspects of any of these numbers,
Yeah.
it's life changing.
Well, we're going to talk more about that actually in next week's episode because we've been talking about karma, talents. We're going to actually talk about that, break it down. So this is really our wrap up on our introduction because this truly
Hmm.
only is an introduction to all of these 22 numbers. So we just want to remind all of you once again to join us over on Instagram at Let's Talk Vibes Podcast. Let us know in the comments which of these energies you resonated with the most. And to also visit us at the ltvpodcast.com if you want to schedule a reading with Yana or myself and really dive into the energies that are in your life, in your chart, I should say. And next week, again, we're going to be teaching you how do you create your own soul contract? Like, how do we calculate charts? What are the aspects? How do you interpret it? So we're going to get into a lot more of those juicy details next week.
I can't wait for that because I think it's really going to start to tie things together for people.
Yes.
And it's going to be just so much fun. And as always, guys, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our podcast. It is the best way to support us, and we really appreciate it. And we will see you next time. Have a blessed day. Bye.
Bye.